More than 30 years ago, I was flipping through a catalog of Chinese medicine books, and one stopped me in my tracks. China Doctor of John Day. It sounded like a paradox. How could someone be from a person? The mystery was solved when I learned that John Day wasn't just a man. It was an old mining town nestled in the high desert of eastern Oregon. For 3 decades, I wanted to come here. Standing inside the Kam Wah Chung building today, I realized it wasn't just a historical site. In some small, profound way, I was visiting part of my own history. When I finally stepped through the door, what struck me wasn't how large it was how intact it felt. Shelves, drawers, bottles, account books, medicines. It didn't feel like a museum. It felt like a living treasure. Interestingly enough, one of my Chinese medicine teachers had little interest in the man who ran this shop, Ying He, known to locals simply as Doc He. My teacher came from an old scholarly lineage in China and viewed Doc He as a frontier herbalist, a country bumpkin who would not know anything from the great medical centers. My herb teacher would have been alarmed to see how he stored his herbs, tucked away in old, colorful American cigar boxes featuring illustrations of Indian chiefs and opera singers. But standing here today, I find that distance to be the very heart of the story. Doc He was born in southern China and arrived in Oregon during the gold rush. In the late 19th century, John Day was a bustling community of Chinese immigrants and white settlers. Kam Wah Chung wasn't just an apothecary, it was a grocery store, a drugstore, a community center, and a sanctuary. The scene reminded me of one of my mentors. Before he retired, he saw patients right out of his apartment. Neighbors would stop by to chat, patients would linger long after receiving their formulas, and they drank endless cups of hot tea. It wasn't a serene, sterile hospital. It was loud, boisterous, alive. I remember being faced with that green tea. It looked clear, but boy, it hit me like rocket fuel. I thought I'd had a triple espresso. Yet these serene older patients would drink that tea all day, practice Tai Chi, engage in ballroom dancing at night, and use combinations of herbs to treat every condition under the sun. As the gold dried up, the mining business died, and most of the Chinese population left. But Doc He stayed. Whatever prejudices there were, the patients kept coming to him because they knew he could help. He treated everyone, Chinese and white, with absolute equality. He became legendary for treating blood poisoning, septic shock, influenza, and lockjaw. These conditions were terrifyingly fatal in the frontier era. I feel a deep personal kinship with Doc He. I was drawn to Chinese medicine after I developed and almost died from a serious aggressive digestive condition when I was 19. That illness motivated me to learn everything I could. Like Doc He, I became fascinated by the living, breathing reality of this medicine. Years later, traveling to China and working with mentors, it was eye-opening to see modern research proving exactly what frontier practitioners have known for over 2,000 years. Kam Wah Chung reminds us that healing traditions do not just belong to one culture. Ideas travel, people travel, medicines travel. For me, this tiny stone building in eastern Oregon is not simply a monument to the past. It's a living reminder that medicine is always evolving. If you look at Chinese medicine today, we're largely known for treating chronic, lingering conditions, things like the chronic digestive disorder that hit me when I was 19, leaving me isolated in a hospital with a high fever. It was a traditional formula that finally turned my health around and made me realize this was a worthy, lifelong profession. But out in the 19th century Oregon high desert, Doc He wasn't treating modern chronic illness. He was practicing a high-stakes, life-or-death version of medicine. He became a frontier legend because he successfully treated acute and terrifying killers, things like blood poisoning, meningitis, mumps, and lockjaw, all at a time when conventional medicine had very few answers. Furthermore, over a third of his patients were women suffering from severe complications resulting from childbirth. Because I went on to found a Chinese herbal health company, I look at Doc Hay's historical formulas with a very specific practical lens. Classical Chinese medicine formulas rely on elegant individual formulas of 4 to 16 ingredients. Doc Hay, out of sheer frontier necessity, would sometimes throw 60 different herbs into a single prescription. He was at the mercy of 19th century shipping lanes from San Francisco to Seattle, so he adapted to what was available. To be honest, if you took his multi-herb formulas to a University of Chinese medicine, the scholars would completely dismiss them. But he was a pure healer who cared about real-world results over textbook rules. When I first took a traditional bitter formula for a stubborn case of the flu, the healing results were undeniable, but as I choked it down, I realized that mainstream Americans would never accept chugging down an intense, vile-tasting tea. The single realization is exactly why I stepped out of the treatment room and started a business to provide ready-made, accessible formulas. If a patient won't take the medicine can't heal. Doc Hay's true genius was matching the medicines to the unique people of the Oregon frontier. When you step into Doc Hay's private living quarters, the sheer humility of it hits you. He lived on a simple, cramped cot tucked directly into the chaotic layout of his apothecary, grocery, and social center. It instantly reminded me of my mentor, Dr. Fung, who ended his days in a small one-room senior citizen housing complex in Oakland, California. Just like Doc Hay, Dr. Fung's entire world was contained in that one room. That one room is where he ate, slept, socialized, and saw an ethnically and economically diverse population of Oakland residents who completely trusted him. Like Doc Hay, he served all walks of life. Whether his patients were white or Chinese, they all respected his pulse diagnosis. It is said that Doc Hay was a master pulse taker who could read a patient's inner weakness just by pressing their wrist. There is a vast difference between how Western medicine measures the pulse and how a master of Chinese medicine reads it. To illustrate this, I'll share a story from the last day of my father's life. I was sitting by his bed, holding his wrist, taking his pulse at the exact same time as his hospice nurse. I felt his pulse sinking deep and growing incredibly frail. The wave was coming in slowly and meekly. All signs of a fading constitution. The hospice nurse looked at her digital monitor and said, "Oh, his heart is still quite strong. It's beating 60 beats per minute." But that's the entire point. Western medicine looks primarily at the rate, the raw number. Chinese pulse diagnosis looks at the quality. How does the wave enter? How does it leave the body? How hard do we have to search to find it? Through these subtle findings, the true practitioner can read your immediate health and long-term constitution. Doc Hay read the pulse of the Oregon frontier, and that's why his legacy still echoes in the desert today. But I want to tell you, my father's connection to the world of natural medicine started long before I entered that room. His mom, my grandmother, is what I would call a lay herbalist. She didn't have an academic degree, far from it. She had to drop out of school in the 6th grade. But she did have a backyard kitchen, a deep understanding of the land, and a kitchen pharmacy. This is the great secret of medicine. Before it was institutionalized, healing belonged to the people who watched the earth. Doc Hay carried a highly sophisticated system in his mind, but his daily life in the Oregon high desert was no different in spirit than an American farm mother or a frontier healer. They all listened to the same quiet language of nature. Years later, when my father was facing his final battle with both lung and brain cancer, his paths crossed with a Western oncologist who had been born in China, Dr. Chi. She was incredibly generous with her time. She spent over an hour with us just talking about my father's life, his wishes, and his philosophies. My dad was a proud, practical man. He made it clear he didn't want any heroic therapy, although ultimately he did agree to a limited course of palliative radiation. During our long conversation, Dr. Chi looked at me and said, "I understand you know about Chinese medicine from your father." Trying to be humble, I said, "Yeah, I know a little bit." She smiled and asked, "What kind of herbs do you use? Do you know their Chinese names?" When I gave her the traditional Chinese names, she offered a piece of encouragement that absolutely amazed me coming from a Western oncologist. She said, "That's wonderful. I highly suggest you use herbs and acupuncture with your father. They will be incredibly helpful to maintain his body's strength and help him deal with the side effects." Now, she wasn't telling us to throw out conventional care, but she completely validated the harmony of both worlds. The immediate challenge was my dad. He had absolutely no interest in drinking a bitter-tasting Chinese herbal tea, nor did he want to swallow a handful of modern tablets to substitute for the tea. So we settled on a practical adaptation. My dad used astragalus, the Chinese name is Wang Qi, right inside his chicken soup, and he took simple ginseng capsules. He found that this simple kitchen medicine approach was incredibly helpful to restore his energy levels. Ultimately, neither the Chinese herbs nor the radiation cured his cancer, but they gave him a vitality he would not have had otherwise. He was completely at peace with making a quiet, comfortable, and struggle-free end. Seeing that modern oncologists bridge both worlds and watching my father adapt those remedies in his kitchen brought my mind right back to John Day. So today, if you visit the Kam Wah Chung Interpretive Center in Eastern Oregon, you can see the incredible preservation work being done to honor his legacy. It's no longer a forgotten stone building in a remote mining town. It's a historical sanctuary. They've preserved hundreds of herbs, old ledger books, and the tiny cot where Doc Hay slept. And I asked one of the people at the interpretive center, "So you kept all the herbs?" And she said, "We kept all the herbs, and some of them were in terrible shape, being kept in old cigar boxes. We kept all the herbs, except we had to remove the opium and the cocaine." And I said, "Cocaine? In a Chinese herbal pharmacy?" And she said, "We thought that was strange too, but Doc Hay treated whatever he could that was effective." So the curators aren't just preserving old boxes, they're preserving a proof that traditional medicine endures because it works. The entire journey from a 19-year-old kid surviving an illness with a traditional formula to my father's mother to the pulse of his final day point to a singular truth. This medicine is not just a job, it's a way of life. A few years ago, the New York Times interviewed Oakland herbalist Henry Wong. They asked him if he would always practice Chinese herbs. He looked at the reporter and gave an answer that defines Doc Hay, my own mentors, and everyone who keeps this ancient pulse beating. He said, "I will practice Chinese herbs until the moment before I die." Doc Hay practiced in that tiny room until his body gave out. The gold mines closed, the crowds left, but the healer stayed. As long as we keep listening to the pulse, his medicine remains fully alive.